Almost 2 decades ago, when I was just 9 years old, the world as I knew it ended before my young imagination could even begin to fathom what that would entail. My mom had passed away too soon, and Dad and I were trying to fill the void clumsily with our own brand of grief. Life had a beat, and it was the same sad, monotonous melody we marched to until Dad changed key. Her name was Marlene. And one night, Dad sat me at the kitchen table, rewrapping his fingers around Mom's black coffee mug. "Sophia, do you mind meeting someone for me tomorrow?" "Oh yeah, her name's Marlene, and I know." "Well, she is kind of a friend," he said, looking away from me. "Why, Dad? Who is she?" Excited and a bit dismayed. My curiosity was piqued, but I also had that knot in the pit of my stomach. There was something in the way he would not look me in the eye to be anything more than a friend. Dad sighed, a weary sound. I just think it's time, pumpkin. The sooner we start to rediscover any joy in living." One day, Marlene came into our house. Her presence created a kind of atmosphere that was alien to this place. The lady was smiling, and sweet as pie, offering her hand bright with rings. "Hello, Sophia." She spoke with a sweet voice. "I have heard so much about you." I turned and shook hands with her, noticing the chill of her skin. "Ah," I said under my breath as Dad started to give her a tour. My eyes followed her as she scanned the living room, walking a few steps behind. Her smile faded, however, partially when her eyes reached the family photos, Mom primarily, and a momentary little expression of scorn made its way across her face. I saw it, even if Dad didn't. This was in August, and before I knew it, months had went by. Marlene went from being Dad's friend to Dad's wife. The true colors that eventually revealed themselves were not the stark and brash nature of a whore, but rather shades disguised by deceptions sprinkled with lies. After dinner, Dad asked me about my outgrown wardrobe. "That is until Sophia started getting big." He mentioned offhand, "We will have to get her some new school clothes." Just listen how Marlene was fast to pounce on this chance. "Oh, let me handle that. Shop online, I know what she likes, and I'm going to get the best for Sophia." Her voice lathered with barely above mild excitement. A week later, Marlene unrolled the treasures from her shopping spree. I looked absolutely ridiculous, the outfits all several sizes too large on my desperate 12th grade shoulders and pooling fabric at me feet. "Look at this, darling. I bought it all on clearance and she will grow into most of them." "TISETCLYWGHATIWNTE," cried Marlene, holding up a tent masquerading as a dress. Her dad smiled back, proud and thankful. "Marlene, that's brilliant. So thoughtful of you." I tried to protest, but "Dad, they're too big. I'll look silly." The expression was honeyed but condescending. She had cut off Marlene. "Oh, darling, it's for the best. Kids your age grows so fast. Not to mention, we're saving cash on more essential items." My face burned with embarrassment. School the next day was just what I expected. Hey, Scarecrow. After all, what happened to the other part of the barn? The taunts echoed, and every word pierced my heart like a needle in madness. I went home that day with my big clothes swallowing me, a spirit as jagged and broken up. I used to tell Dad about the teasing, but Marlene was always one step ahead again, with her glistening lies and candy-coated deceit. "Sophia, Sophia, those people are jealous, I am positive. You are so beautiful, and keep in mind, we are making sensible decisions," she said with her hand lying on top of mine. Dad agrees. Huh. And she wasn't even on a computer. Marlene's right, pumpkin. It's all about being smart. Things just go worse after the whole clothes debate. Marlene, my stepmom, was doing the perfect job to play her part, deceiving everyone and pretending to be nice. On the outside, she was your perfect mother, but behind closed doors is where you got to see a whole different person. One evening while Dad was working double shift, Marlene offered to help me with my homework. "Sophia, can we please just do this math?" she said sweetly, a snarl in her voice. Being well aware of what happened to her proposed help, I wanted no part in this. "Jesus, I have it, Marlene," gesturing at the doll now on my person in response to attempt and keep the shakiness out of my voice. "Nonsense," she said, and dragged a chair over next to me. The moment she leaned down to review my workbook, her critiques started. "Sophia, darling, this is all wrong. Is this still unclear to you? It's simple arithmetic." What she said cut me to the bone, but my math was correct. I double-checked it, Marlene. That's exactly like the examples in the book. I attempted to defend myself, more exasperated by the minute. Marlene shook her head and tutted. "Then you must have misread the textbook. Allow me to demonstrate the proper way, and then she make it wrong." When my math teacher was reviewing the homework, I got an exhortation to better check over it in class right before everyone. I was humiliated even more to say that it wasn't my fault. I tried to talk it over with Dad that night. "Tell Dad what happened with my math homework on purpose, Marlene," I pleaded. Dad sighed, worn out from work. "Sophia, Marlene sent you help. You know, maybe you're not recognizing her efforts." That was followed by the parent-teacher conference. Marlene refused not to go with Dad. "I want to be a part of Sophia's upbringing," she announced, playing the role of perfect stepmother. And on the day of the conference, oh my goodness, Marlene was all smiles and laughs with my teachers. "Thank you so much for everything you're doing with Sophia. I know she can be a handful, but we are in it to get her," said wise Lehrer. And the worst part was how she volunteered for every school event from hell to breakfast and presented herself as such a saint, giving up her life like that with grace and gentle submission is what stepchildren learn about love. She tried making sure the other parents knew, in soft tones filled with a slight worry. "It is the least I can do for dear Sophia. She has lost her mother, after all." And they totally fell for it. Hook, line and sinker. The saint was obviously Marlene and I, the troubled child, who apparently did not deserve to be loved, nor has she done enough for me. And finally one evening I hardened my heart and decided no, tonight was not another dinner where we all acted like everything was fine. Marlene had cooked, and it was the casserole she knew that I hated but always made me eat because in her words, "It's your sin." Bath, 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 bath. 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 "Can you set the table, Sophia?" When Dad strolled to the kitchen, oblivious to what was about to transpire as he asked, "I don't see why I should." "You all shut up and let Marlene do it," I barked. "Wow, that hurts me," Marlene said with fake shock as pretended to put her hand on heart. "Oh, I just figured you wanted to make yourself useful, Sophia. I made your favorite." I snickered. I could not hold my disgust. A favorite of mine, or just one of those random things you're whipping up because it gives your hands something to do? Dad's smile faded and confusion settled on his face. "Sophia, don't talk to Marlene like that. She's trying to ruin my life, more like," I said lowly so that both she and the man could overhear me. The dinner that followed was a nightmare. Each forkful of casserole was a failure, and every word uttered by Marlene felt like an insult. I pushed food around my plate for a few minutes, then I got up suddenly, forcing the seat of the chair to scrape loudly against its wooden surface. "I'm not hungry," I pronounced and turned to leave this stifling air. Marlene's voice stopped me before I could depart. "Sophia, your behavior of late has been a concern. Perhaps it is time to enforce some structured discipline." Dad, as ever the peacemaker, let out a sigh. "Sophia, we only want what's best for you." I guess the age-old question comes up. Should I do what's best for me, or should I do what is truthfully best for her? I joked, nodding to Marlene, "'Cause it sounds like you only hear hers." It finished with a grounding, and me in my room, stuck by myself, left to ponder the evil seed that germinated inside of me. Things were like a war zone every single day with Marlene, but after my bold act of rebellion at the dinner table, not long afterwards battle was joined. All the little slip-ups, all innocent mistakes were suddenly proof that I was a rebel or an ill-natured person. Marlene had a gift of turning things around where inherently I was always to blame. Dad just acquiesced. One day, when I accidentally spilled a glass of juice in the kitchen, something was waiting to be unraveled and unwelcome guests began knocking on my door. Marlene swooped down like a hawk, peering through an almost joyfully judging face. "Look at this mess, Sophia. That is precisely what I am talking about right there. Carelessness. It's just like your mother." Marlene's voice fell as the inference permeated the room. My anger rose and I could feel color draining from my face. Bringing Mom into this was a low blow, even for Marlene. "Fuck you, shit stain. Asterisk, don't start with my mom, okay, slut. You're nothing like her." Father dashed in looking worn. He had heard the disturbance. "What's all this?" Sophia apologized to Marlene. "It was just an accident." "I will not." I shot back, my voice rising. "She is always pointing the finger at me, calling me clumsy and stupid. Just, like Mom was. But she's wrong. If you could see it, Dad's face was stone-cold stern. "Sophia, that's enough. Marlene's only trying to help. She cares about you." "Cares about me?" The thought was laughable. My voice was breaking as I turned to Dad. "How can you say that? She is still riding my ass about being the perfect wife and stepmom in front of you. But she's not. You get it, and you never listened to me." Years later, when the house was silent, and I had a moment to mull over everything, it struck me how much damage that did. And more importantly, my sense of self and confidence were both crumbling beneath Marlene's constant bashing. It was no longer in the sense of fighting back. It was about holding on to me, and who I think my mom wanted me to be. Our home life had become this sort of silent war. I was learning to sidestep Marlene's jabs, head bowed under the electric light in hopes of passing unnoticed. That is, until one run-of-the-mill Tuesday everything shifted. It was strange that Dad did not come downstairs for breakfast. He was the first up, a habit of decades to start early in his job. I made my own way over to his space, assuming he might have needed a sick day, something I never saw him do. I knew something was up the second I opened their door and heard how eerily quiet it had become. Silence that sits on you, echoing with terror. "Dad?" I could hardly speak above a whisper, frozen on the floor. He lay there so limp, too limp. As he fell, a wave of panic stormed over me, and I hurried to his side. My hand trembled as I reached for him. I pleaded, the reality hitting my stomach with a free fall. "Dad, please." Then Marlene came, screams so shrill that for a few moments I could barely see through the disbelief of my thick head. The next several hours passed in a blur. Ambulances, whispers, and pitiful glances. The ruling, a heart attack that came from out of nowhere. It all culminated in his funeral, a series of events that felt so surreal, I navigated through the days like a ghost. And of course played the grieving widow like she was born for that very role. Her tears betrayed her, and what sobs they were. They sounded empty to me, just echoes against the stone of genuine grief that was lodged in my chest. I just can't," she wailed to anybody who would lend an ear. "He was my everything, and now I am the one who has to look after Sophia. How will I manage?" This only exasperated my anger. Her words were a plea for sympathy. Manage, like I was just an inconvenience, a thing to be corrected. I wanted to scream and tell her to stop pretending, but I kept mute, with my sorrow weighing down so heavily on my heart. The house after the funeral felt emptier than I could have imagined. It was a silence that weighed heavily upon us, silencing the void Dad's death had already constructed in our world. One of those long, silent afternoons is when Marlene decided to show her colors once more. We sat in the lounge room surrounded by our unspoken grievances, but it was Marlene turning to me now, eyes cold and lethal. "Now, Sophia," she said in a sickeningly soft voice. "Now wait a minute, what did I say? And the way things are gonna be." Suddenly my body stiffened from her tone. "What do you mean?" Although the last word was accompanied by a smile, it did not warm in her eyes. "You see, your father is gone, so I am your guardian, which means I own you and all your fortitude." My heart sank. I had almost already forgotten the large sum of money that Dad left, too wrapped up in my mourning to see past it. "What about it?" I managed to keep my voice steady as I asked. "Oh, sweetie, don't worry. I'll take good care of it. You know, it's what your father would have wanted," she sneered with false sympathy. Her words transported and seized my heart with the weight of 1,000-ton bricks. The last thing Dad would have wanted was for Marlene to control my life and money. "You can't do that. That's my money," I claimed, starting to get mad. Marlene's smile grew wider, but there was a scary element in her face. "Actually, I can, and I will. You're just a child, Sophia. Money management, real-life experience, who teaches you all this?" "Negative. Now it's me doing the calling. And as for you..." She stopped as if she was getting closer. "We have a place and respect yours, or we will make your life miserable." I can't let her have wreaking havoc with my life and what I had been left behind unsupervised after the warrant and this stupid guardianship nonsense from Marlene, so I'm getting every penny. It was time to fight back. However, I needed an advocate, someone to help me through the scary legal and emotional world in which I had somehow got myself entrenched. I was thinking only of Aunt Margaret, who was Dad's sister. I tried to be really nice though, but she had always been good to me, and I knew my dad said how much easier difficult times were due to the fact of having people like her around. So I reached for the phone, trembling hands dialing Aunt Margaret. Her phone rang 3 times before she picked up. "Hello, Aunt Margaret, it's me, Sophia." "Sophia, how are you, honey?" It was the wrong move, and now you will never know, because your guardians wrapped me in blankets long before sunrise and took me to a small county clinic for blood work. I exhaled and steadied my nerves. "I'm not good, Aunt Margaret. I need your help. It's Marlene Shays." The words exploded out of me. All my fear, all my frustration and Marlene's mistrust spilt into the room. My Aunt Margaret was silent for a moment, but she answered in stern tone of voice. "Sophia, I suspected her grief was in your dad's eyes. Well, spill everything and we will hatch a plan." A good hour passed, me on the phone with Aunt Margaret giving her my perspective on big clothes and fakeness, passing over everyone else but myself, and most importantly expounding Marlene's plans for inheritance. The call ended with a glimmer of hope. Aunt Margaret said she would see where things lay with becoming my legal guardian and taking me away from Marlene. The following day Aunt Margaret came, and it was the raising of spirits in that house. Marlene squinted at her, detecting a change in the dynamic but unable to place it. Aunt Margaret wasted no time. "Marlene, we need to talk. It's about Sophia." Marlene crossed her arms and forced a smile. "What about her?" "It's simple. You're not fit to be her keeper. I'm going to court and collecting Sophia." The smile flickered across Marlene's face, her eyes growing wary. "You can't do that. I'm her stepmother. I have rights." Finally, I spoke up, my voice barely stronger than how I felt. "I want to live with Aunt Margaret. Marlene, I don't belong here with you." At that Marlene laughed, a bitter grating sound that resounded leeringly round the living room. "Do you even believe you're allowed to have power in this? You're just a kid. This is not your place to comment." And then Aunt Sarah stepped, the iron voice clearly bearing resolve. "Actually, it does. Sophia is 14. The law says she can choose who to live with, and now has chosen me." The last time the court ruled in Aunt Margaret's favor, I knew that this was a number 1 with a bullet for sure. It is day 1 of my life post-court. So I quickly moved in with her, leaving the likes of Marlene and all her manipulation problems behind. She didn't just stand in for my guardian, she was a mom. Not long after, it was official, and she adopted me, which just further solidified what we already had in our hearts. One night, Aunt Margaret and me sat on the porch watching a pretty orange-pink sky sunset. We were talking about grades, future bullcrap stuff when she gave me a look and asked this one question. "Sophia, you know you've got a whole world of possibilities ahead of you, right?" she said, taking a sip of her tea. I grimaced, the world of these last few years casting long shadows up ahead. I guess I just cannot figure out where to begin. Aunt Margaret lowered her tea, staring fully at Meatling. "Start with what you love. However, if you don't know at the moment, do not fret about it now, because remember it's your whole life to get there. But for now, it's a time of discovery, trying things out." I was fired up by her words, the dormant ambition that Marlene had almost managed to snuff out igniting. I did something I felt a little embarrassed to do. I confessed that yes, I was always into numbers and stuff like math or puzzles. Aunt Margaret's face lit up. "That's fantastic, Sophia. You know, XIZ, egg, accounting, engineering and economics. The sky's the limit." "Economics," I echoed, the word having a poetic ring to it. I liked the sound of that. After that, Aunt Margaret became my greatest supporter. She got me registered for pre-business classes in preparation to pursue an undergrad degree, and took on my dream with a fervor that was both wonderful, yet sometimes intimidating. Aunt Margaret made a banner, and we had cake. I got my scholarship acceptance into college in economics that day. Her eyes misting with proud tears, she said, "Future economist you are looking at." I laughed, hugging her tight. "Not without you, Aunt Margaret. You saved me, in so many ways." She squeezed me, probably even tighter. "We saved each other, kiddo. Remember that. We're a team." And she was right. We flipped the page together and entered into a promising future. With Aunt Margaret, it was not just a new dawn in my life. Rather, it seemed like I had started living for the first time. It had been nearly a decade since she and Marlene shared the same roof. I had managed to build a life for myself, working as an economist in one of the best private builders, and finally dared mortgage my small apartment. A little corner of the city that I told everyone was all mine. I could enjoy the goodness and uncomplicated nature of it all. Well, that was before the past came back with a vengeance one day. It was a typical Thursday afternoon when I received the phone call. Buried in reports and forecasts at my desk, I hardly even noticed when a message on my phone saying that new push came from the number of someone completely unfamiliar to me. "Is this Sophia Harrison?" The voice on the other end was icy and businesslike. "Yes, speaking. Who's this?" "This is City General Hospital. Your mom is at our hospital. She's asking for your help." A jolt of confusion hit me. There is a mistake, I think. My mom died ages ago. Then, after a pause, the caller added, "Excuse me, you are not Mrs. Harrison's mother. It's your stepmother, Marlene." Marlene just mentioning the name after all these years was a slap in the face. I was equal parts surprised, skeptical, and intrigued. "What's wrong with her?" "You see, she is hospitalized for a serious stand. She's asking to see you." I took a deep breath and felt myself say yes to the visit. "Okay, I will stop by later, end of work day." When I saw her for the first time, she was in a social ward, wraith-like compared to the robust woman I had known. All the gloss and veneer that she always showed to the world had vanished. This was a shadow of my stepmother. When she noticed me, her gaze met mine, and something flashed across her look. Maybe relief. "Sophia," she murmured, her voice as thin as the bodice of an old wedding dress. "You actually came." I pulled up a chair next to the bed, trying hard not to wear my emotions on my sleeve. "Hospital called, said you wanted to see me." She released a breath that sounded like she was giving up. "I ruined it all. The money from your father is over. So here I am, with nothing. Help, treatment and rehab reposited in you, my dear Sophia." In that cold, sterile light of the hospital room, memories flooded back to me. It all came flooding back, all those years under Marlene's roof, the comments she made that I pretended not to hear, but which cut me deep anyway. Her maneuvering for control over my kids and even our marriage, and always making sure every belly laugh from James managed to squeeze tight around his throat before it escaped. Now she was calling on me for help, but would the same have been true were our roles reversed? It was obvious from the contempt that burned in her eyes whenever she would so much as glance my way. The words fell from my lips as the water spilled into each line of me. "I remember everything, Marlene," I said with a clear voice that matched the internal stability I'd cultivated through all those years. "Every time I needed you, but you chose not to. Why should I help you now?" The illusion of vulnerability that Marlene had been meticulously constructing crumbled in an instant when she scowled her response. She spat out, "You simple, ungrateful little brat. Did I not give you a home when my heart didn't have to? You owe me. I'm your mother by law. Unless you help me, I will sue your ass off. I'll be leaving with every single dime of yours." The laughter grew inside of me and I could not contain it, ringing through the sterile walls. It was too bizarre a threat. Her desperation had gone a step beyond sanity. "Sue me? For what? You remember, Aunt Margaret adopted me. You're dead to me, the Godfather fashion. A stranger." Immediately, the realization struck Marlene with such ferocity that she appeared as if assaulted by a force of nature, her brows knitting and mouth gaping in agitation. She went off in a sort of rant that was part threat and remonstrance, but they no longer had any power over me. They had been the final weak flailings of a woman who could no longer fight. And there, with a long hard gaze at her like the first time I had ever looked at them, all that could be seen was someone very sad and feeble presenting themselves as if they held an unchallengeable power. "Marlene, and not your daughter. True. By blood, no, and law certainly not, but you took care of that years ago." I turned on my heel and left the room, her yells of anger and desolation lessening with every stride. It felt as though she was the burden to my existence of carrying her legacy, and with that, all her problems returning. But after I took this decision, everything seemed a lot more far than present. Out of doors, the sunlight was brighter and the air more refreshing. I inhaled deeply and enjoyed it, the release, letting go. Marlene was my past, defined by time and circumstance, but a book finally closed in my life forever with the pen firmly once again rested between fingers of mine that choose to write their story one step at a time on terms I decree.
Marrying him might have saved my life, but living with him almost destroyed it. Those haunting words echoed in my mind as I stared at the ornate mirror, the golden frame, a stark contrast to the turmoil raging within me. It had all started with a chance encounter at a charity gala, where Alex Preston's charming smile and captivating presence had swept me off my feet. A whirlwind courtship followed, filled with lavish dates, heartfelt promises, and the assurance that he was the man of my dreams. Little did I know that underneath that polished exterior lurked a web of deceit so tangled that it would almost suffocate me. "Eliza, darling, are you ready?" Alex's voice drifted through the bedroom door, snapping me back to reality. "Just a minute," I called out, forcing a smile onto my face as I smoothed the silky fabric of my dress. As I stepped out, Alex's eyes raked over me appreciatively. "You look stunning, my love." He leaned in, planting a kiss on my cheek, his familiar cologne enveloping me. The ride to the Preston family estate was filled with idle chatter, but my mind wandered to the events that had brought me here. Barely 6 months ago, I had been a carefree, independent woman, content with my career and social circle. Then Alex swept in, spinning tales of undying love and a future filled with happiness. Little did I know that by accepting his proposal, I was stepping into a gilded cage. The estate loomed before us, its imposing architecture a testament to the family's wealth and prestige. As we entered, a figure emerged from the shadows, her sharp gaze immediately fixing on me. "Vivian, I'd like you to meet my wife, Eliza," Alex said, his voice tinged with pride. Vivian, Alex's older sister, offered a tight smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Welcome to the family, Eliza." In that moment, I sensed an undercurrent of tension, a subtle warning that all was not as it seemed within the walls of this grand estate. As the evening progressed, surrounded by Alex's closest friends and business associates, I found myself drowning in a sea of polite conversations and forced smiles. Vivian's calculating glances only added to my growing unease. It wasn't until later, when the guests had dispersed and Alex had retired for the night, that I allowed myself to confront the nagging doubts that had taken root. Seated in the dimly lit library, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had entered a world far more complex and dangerous than I could have ever imagined. The question was, would I have the strength to untangle myself from this web before it consumed me completely? The grand foyer of the Preston estate should have filled me with awe, but instead, a sense of unease crept over me as I stepped inside my new home. The opulent chandeliers cast a warm glow, yet the atmosphere felt chilly and unwelcoming. "Let me show you around," Alex said, his hand resting possessively on the small of my back as he guided me through the winding corridors. Each room was more extravagant than the last, from the sprawling living area adorned with priceless antiques to the state-of-the-art kitchen that could have belonged in a five-star restaurant. It was a world of wealth and privilege I had never experienced before. "And this will be our bedroom," Alex announced, pushing open a set of double doors to reveal a lavish suite that could have easily accommodated a small palace. As I took in the plush furnishings and the breathtaking view from the floor-to-ceiling windows, a movement in the corner of my eye caught my attention. Vivian stood in the doorway, her arms crossed, her gaze piercing. "Impressive, isn't it?" she remarked, her tone laced with sarcasm. "I hope you'll be comfortable here, Eliza." Before I could respond, Alex stepped forward, his demeanor shifting from doting husband to protective brother. "Vivian, I thought we discussed this. Eliza is my wife now, and she deserves to be treated with respect." Vivian's eyes narrowed, and for a moment I could have sworn I saw a flicker of contempt cross her features. "Of course, dear brother, I wouldn't dream of making your precious wife feel unwelcome." With a curt nod, she turned on her heel and disappeared down the hallway, leaving an uncomfortable silence in her wake. "Don't mind her," Alex murmured, wrapping his arms around me from behind. "Vivian has always been a little difficult." His touch, once comforting, now felt suffocating, and I couldn't shake the feeling that there was far more to this sibling rivalry than met the eye. Over the next few weeks, I found myself walking on eggshells, constantly navigating the minefield of tensions that permeated the estate. Vivian's presence was like a dark cloud, casting a shadow over every interaction, her cutting remarks and icy glares leaving me feeling unsettled and unwelcome in my own home. "You shouldn't let her get to you," Alex would say, his reassuring words ringing hollow in the face of Vivian's open hostility. But it wasn't just Vivian's behavior that set my nerves on edge. There were subtle shifts in Alex's demeanor, too. The way he would dismiss my concerns with a wave of his hand, or the way his touch would linger a little too long, as if he were trying to assert his dominance. It was during one of these moments, as he gripped my arm a little too tightly while chastising me for some perceived misstep, that I caught a glimpse of something in his eyes, a flicker of cruelty that sent shivers down my spine. In that instant, I realized that the man I had married was not the charming, loving soul he had pretended to be. There was a darkness lurking beneath the surface, and I found myself questioning everything I thought I knew about him. As I lay awake that night, Alex's even breathing beside me, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had somehow become trapped in a gilded cage with no idea how to escape. The sound of raised voices echoed through the study, shattering the usual tranquility of the estate. Curiosity got the better of me as I crept closer, the muffled words becoming clearer. "Can't keep sweeping this under the rug, Alex. The shareholders are getting restless." It was Vivian's voice, sharp and accusatory. My heart raced as I pressed my ear against the door, straining to make out Alex's response. "I have it under control," he snapped, his tone laced with irritation. "The last thing we need is for word to get out about our creative accounting practices." "Creative accounting practices?" My mind whirled as the implications of those words sank in. Could Alex be involved in something illegal? Before I could ponder further, the sound of footsteps approaching sent me scurrying away from the door, my heart pounding in my chest. I busied myself with straightening the vase on the hallway table, trying to appear nonchalant as Vivian emerged from the study, her face flushed with anger. "Eliza," she said curtly, her gaze sweeping over me with undisguised disdain. "I didn't realize you were lurking about." "I wasn't," I stammered, my palms growing clammy. "I was just passing by." Vivian's eyes narrowed, and for a moment I thought she might call out my lie. But then her expression softened ever so slightly, and she leaned in closer. "You should be careful, Eliza," she murmured, her voice low and laced with warning. "There are things happening in this family that you know nothing about." Before I could respond, she had swept past me, leaving me reeling in her wake. What did she mean by that? Was she implying that Alex was involved in something illegal, something that could put our entire family at risk? The questions swirled in my mind, but I knew better than to confront Alex directly. Instead, I bided my time, keeping my eyes and ears open for any clue that might shed light on the shadows that seemed to be closing in around us. It wasn't long before I stumbled upon my first piece of evidence. Late one night, as Alex worked at his desk in the study, I slipped in under the guise of bringing him a nightcap. As I placed the glass on the desk, a folder caught my eye, a collection of financial statements and ledgers, their pages littered with suspicious-looking entries and crossed-out figures. My heart pounded as I glimpsed the words Shell Corporation and offshore accounts scrawled in the margins. I knew then that my suspicions were well-founded. Alex was involved in something far more sinister than I could have ever imagined. As the weeks passed, I became a silent observer, gathering what information I could while maintaining a careful facade of ignorance. Whispered conversations, coded emails, and furtive glances all added to the mounting pile of evidence that pointed to one inescapable truth. My husband was a liar and a cheat, and the very foundation of our marriage was built on deceit. Yet even as the walls closed in around us, I couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope that perhaps I could find a way to untangle this tangled web before it consumed us both. The soft glow of the bedside lamp cast eerie shadows across the room as I pored over the documents scattered on the desk. My hands trembled as I flipped through the pages, each one revealing a new layer of Alex's deception. Financial statements riddled with discrepancies, emails detailing shady business dealings, and a trail of breadcrumbs leading straight to offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. The evidence was damning, and yet a part of me still clung to the hope that there was some innocent explanation, some misunderstanding that could justify the chaos unfolding before my eyes. It was then that the ping of an incoming message shattered the silence, the sound making me jump. Alex's phone vibrated on the nightstand, the screen illuminating with a new notification. Against my better judgment, I reached for it, my heart pounding in my chest. The message was innocuous at first glance. A simple, "Can't wait to see you tomorrow" from a contact labeled Jessica. But as I scrolled further, my breath caught in my throat. Message after message, each one more explicit than the last, painted a clear picture of Alex's infidelity. "Missing your touch. Counting down the hours until I can hold you again. You know how much I crave you." The words blurred together as hot tears stung my eyes. The man I had trusted, the man I had loved with every fiber of my being, had been deceiving me from the start. His promises of devotion were nothing but hollow lies, his vows of fidelity cast aside with callous disregard. The sound of footsteps in the hallway jolted me back to reality, and I scrambled to gather the scattered documents, my hands shaking uncontrollably. In my haste, I knocked over a picture frame, the shattering glass echoing like a gunshot in the stillness of the night. The bedroom door flew open, and there stood Alex, his face contorted in a mixture of anger and fear. "What the hell are you doing?" he snarled, his eyes landing on the incriminating papers clutched in my trembling hands. My voice faltered as I struggled to form a coherent response, the weight of his betrayal crushing me from all sides. Alex's gaze hardened, and he advanced towards me, his movements slow and deliberate, like a predator closing in on its prey. "You weren't supposed to see those," he hissed, snatching the documents from my grasp. "Alex, please?" I pleaded, my heart pounding in my chest. "Just tell me the truth." For a moment, his expression softened, and I dared to hope that he might offer an explanation, a chance to salvage the shattered remnants of our relationship. But then, His lips twisted into a cruel smile, and the illusion was shattered. "The truth?" he sneered, leaning in close enough for me to smell the whiskey on his breath. "The truth is, you're nothing but a means to an end, Eliza. A pretty little trophy wife to help me maintain appearances while I take care of business." His words cut deep, each one a razor-sharp blade slicing through the fragile threads that had bound us together. In that moment, I knew there was no turning back, no chance for reconciliation. The man I thought I knew was gone, replaced by a monster driven by greed and deceit. "If you breathe a word of this to anyone," Alex continued, his grip tightening around my wrist until I winced in pain, "I'll make sure you regret the day you ever crossed me." As he stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind him, I sank to the floor, my body racked with sobs. The world as I knew it had come crashing down around me, leaving me adrift in a sea of lies and broken promises. But even as despair threatened to consume me, a flicker of determination ignited deep within. I would not be a victim, not anymore. It was time to take back control, no matter the cost. The heavy oak door creaked open, and Vivian slipped into the dimly lit library, her eyes scanning the room before settling on me. "Eliza, what's going on?" "Your message sounded urgent." I took a deep breath, steeling my resolve. "I know everything, Vivian, about Alex's illegal activities, his offshore accounts, his mistress." Vivian's expression hardened, and for a moment I thought she might deny it all. But then her shoulders sagged, and she sank into the nearest armchair, defeat etched across her features. "So, he finally showed his true colors," she muttered, her voice laced with bitterness. "I tried to warn you, Eliza, but you were too blinded by his charm to see the monster he really is." "You knew?" I felt a surge of anger rising within me. "You knew what he was up to, and you didn't say anything?" Vivian's gaze met mine, her eyes filled with a mixture of remorse and determination. I had my suspicions, but I could never get my hands on any solid proof. That snake always covered his tracks too well. "Well, now we have the proof," I said, sliding the stack of incriminating documents across the table towards her. "And we're going to use it to bring him down." Vivian's perfectly manicured brows arched in surprise. "We? You want to take over the company, don't you?" I pressed on, my voice gaining strength with each word. "Well, this is our chance. Together, we can expose Alex's misdeeds and get him out of the way for good." A slow smile spread across Vivian's face, and for the first time I saw a glimmer of respect in her eyes. "I have to admit, I underestimated you, Eliza. You've got more fire in you than I gave you credit for." She leaned forward, her gaze intense. "All right, let's do this, but we have to be smart about it. Alex is a snake, and he'll stop at nothing to protect his precious empire." Over the next few days, Vivian and I pored over the evidence, meticulously cataloging every shred of proof, every damning email and suspicious transaction. It was a delicate dance, carefully planning our next moves while maintaining a facade of normalcy around Alex. The tension in the house was palpable, with Alex constantly on edge, his eyes narrowed in suspicion whenever Vivian and I were in the same room. But we played our parts well, acting the dutiful wife and the supportive sister, all the while plotting his downfall. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" Vivian asked one night as we finalized our strategy. "Once we set this in motion, there's no going back." I thought of Alex's cruel words, the way he had threatened and belittled me, and a steely resolve settled over me. "I'm ready. He's going to pay for what he's done, one way or another." The day of the board meeting arrived, and Vivian and I took our seats at the long mahogany table, our game faces firmly in place. Alex strode in, his confidence barely masking the undercurrent of tension that rippled through the room. As he launched into his polished presentation, projecting financial figures and growth projections onto the screen behind him, I caught Vivian's eye. A slight nod was all it took, and we made our move. "Actually, Alex," Vivian's voice cut through the air like a knife, "I think we should take a closer look at those numbers." Alex faltered, his bravado slipping for just a moment as Vivian began pulling up document after document, laying bare the truth about his misdeeds. The room erupted into chaos, with board members demanding explanations and lawyers scrambling to take notes. Through it all, Alex maintained a veneer of composure, his eyes darting between Vivian and me with a mixture of fury and disbelief. But as the evidence mounted, as the weight of his lies threatened to crush him, The mask finally slipped. "You'll pay for this, Eliza," he snarled, his voice dripping with venom. "Mark my words, you'll regret the day you crossed me." But as I met his gaze, unflinching, I knew that the power had finally shifted. The tangled web of lies he had woven was unraveling before our very eyes, and there was no escape for the monster at its center. The boardroom descended into chaos as the full extent of Alex's deception was laid bare. Lawyers scribbled furiously, shareholders hurled accusations, and through it all, Alex stood frozen, his face contorted in a mask of fury. "How dare you?" he snarled, rounding on Vivian and me. "You have no idea what you've done." Vivian met his gaze, unflinching. "We know exactly what we've done, dear brother. We've exposed you for the liar and fraud that you are." A vein throbbed in Alex's temple as he struggled to maintain his composure. "This is all a misunderstanding," he insisted, his voice strained. "I can explain." "Save it, Alex," one of the board members snapped. "The evidence is overwhelming. Your underhanded dealings, the offshore accounts, the financial manipulations, it's all right here in black and white." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room, and I could see the panic flickering in Alex's eyes as his carefully constructed facade crumbled around him. "You're making a grave mistake," he warned, his gaze shifting to me. "You'll regret this, Eliza." I squared my shoulders, refusing to be intimidated by his empty threats. "The only mistake was ever trusting you." As security guards moved in to escort him out, Alex lunged forward, his face twisted into an ugly snarl. "You'll pay for this, you little bitch!" Strong arms restrained him, but not before his fist connected with the side of my face, sending stars bursting across my vision. I stumbled backward, clutching my throbbing cheek, as Vivian rushed to my side. "Are you all right?" she asked, her voice laced with concern. I nodded, blinking back tears of pain and humiliation. "I'm fine. It's nothing compared to what he deserves." As Alex was dragged from the room, his curses and threats echoing down the hallway, a heavy silence settled over the boardroom. It was finally over. The tangled web of lies that had ensnared us all had been severed, and the monster at its center was exposed for the world to see. In the days and weeks that followed, the fallout from Alex's downfall rippled outward, like shockwaves from a seismic event. Lawsuits were filed, investigations launched, and the once mighty Preston empire teetered on the brink of collapse. Through it all, Vivian remained a steadfast ally, guiding the company through the turbulent waters with a deft hand. Together, we worked tirelessly to salvage what remained, to rebuild the tarnished reputation and restore the trust that Alex had so carelessly squandered. It wasn't easy. There were whispers and pointed stares, accusations and innuendo that threatened to drag us down into the mire of scandal. But we persevered, driven by a shared determination to rise from the ashes and forge a new path forward. As for Alex, his world crumbled around him in spectacular fashion. The once charming, larger-than-life figure was reduced to a mere shadow of his former self, his arrogance replaced by desperation as his allies deserted him one by one. I watched from afar as his lavish lifestyle unraveled, his expensive suits traded for prison jumpsuits, his palatial estate seized by the authorities. It was a fate he had brought upon himself, and yet a part of me still felt a twinge of sadness at the sight of his downfall. But that fleeting moment of pity was quickly overshadowed by a sense of triumph and relief. The nightmare was finally over. The tangled web that had ensnared me was no more, and I was free to reclaim the life that had been stolen from me. As I stood in the doorway of my new apartment, taking in the simple furnishings and the warm sunlight streaming through the windows, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. This was a fresh start, a chance to leave the past behind and forge a new path on my own terms. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while I felt a glimmer of hope. I was no longer a victim, no longer a pawn in someone else's twisted game. I was a survivor, a warrior who had stared down the darkness and emerged victorious. And as I stepped out into the world, head held high, I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, I would face them with the same unwavering resilience that had carried me through the storm. The headline screamed Alex's downfall, plastered across every newspaper and news channel in the country. Business mogul exposed as fraud, Preston empire crumbles amidst scandal, each headline more sensational than the last. As I flipped through the pages, my eyes scanning the sordid details of his misdeeds, a part of me still couldn't believe how swiftly everything had unraveled. Just weeks ago, Alex had been the picture of success, a titan of industry with the world at his feet. Now he was a disgraced pariah, his name synonymous with deceit and corruption. The real surprise, however, came in the form of the public's reaction. Instead of sympathy or outrage on his behalf, there was a pervasive sense of schadenfreude, a collective glee at witnessing the fall of a man who had lived so ostentatiously, so arrogantly. He had it coming, one commentator declared on a primetime news program. A man like that, with his penchant for excess and his blatant disregard for the rules, was bound to come crashing down eventually. As the days passed, the avalanche of negative publicity only intensified. Former business associates and allies distanced themselves, scrambling to salvage their own reputations. Even Alex's closest confidants turned on him, offering damning testimonies in exchange for leniency from the authorities. Through it all, Vivian remained a steadfast presence by my side, guiding the company through the turbulent waters with a deft hand. Together, we worked tirelessly to reshape the narrative, to restore the trust and credibility that had been shattered by Alex's actions. It wasn't an easy task. There were skeptics at every turn, those who doubted our ability to rise from the ashes of such a colossal scandal. But Vivian was relentless, her determination fueled by a burning desire to reclaim her family's legacy. This company was built on generations of hard work and integrity, she declared in a press conference, her steely gaze fixed on the cameras. We will not allow one man's greed and hubris to tarnish that. As the legal proceedings unfolded, Alex's once formidable empire crumbled around him. Assets were seized, bank accounts frozen, and his lavish lifestyle reduced to a mere memory. Gone were the designer suits and luxury cars, replaced by the drab uniforms and sterile confines of a prison cell. I caught glimpses of him during the highly publicized trial, his once confident demeanor replaced by a haunted, defeated expression. It was a far cry from the charming, charismatic figure who had once swept me off my feet, and I couldn't help but feel a twinge of pity amidst the overwhelming sense of vindication. But that fleeting moment of empathy was quickly overshadowed by the memories of his cruelty, the way he had manipulated and betrayed me without a shred of remorse. This was the fate he had chosen for himself, and he would have to live with the consequences. As the final gavel fell, sealing Alex's fate with a lengthy prison sentence, a palpable sense of relief washed over me. The nightmare was finally over, the tangled web of lies that had ensnared me severed for good. In the aftermath, Vivian stepped forward to assume the mantle of leadership, her steady hand guiding the company through the turbulent waters of rebranding and restructuring. Under her guidance, the once tarnished empire began to regain its footing, slowly but surely clawing its way back to respectability. As for me, I found solace in the simplicity of my new life. Gone were the lavish trappings and the constant scrutiny that had once been my reality. In their place was a newfound sense of freedom, a chance to start anew without the suffocating weight of Alex's lies and manipulations. It wasn't an easy journey, of course. There were moments of doubt and vulnerability, times when the ghosts of the past threatened to drag me back into the darkness. But each time, I drew strength from the knowledge that I had survived, that I had emerged from the fire stronger and more resilient than ever before. As the months passed, the wounds began to heal, and a newfound sense of clarity took root. I was no longer defined by the trauma of my past, no longer a victim of circumstances beyond my control. I was a survivor, a warrior who had stared down the abyss and emerged victorious. And as I stepped out into the world, head held high, I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, I would face them with the same unwavering determination that had carried me through the storm. The sun filtered through the sheer curtains, bathing my new apartment in a warm, golden glow. It was a far cry from the opulent grandeur of the Preston estate, but as I sipped my morning coffee, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. This was my sanctuary, my safe haven from the chaos and turmoil of the past. Gone were the lavish trappings and the suffocating weight of expectation. In their place was a simple, uncluttered existence, a life of my own making, free from the tangled web of lies and manipulation that had once threatened to consume me. A soft knock at the door pulled me from my reverie, and I padded across the hardwood floor to answer it. Vivian stood on the other side, her signature power suit traded for a casual sundress, her face radiant with a genuine smile. "Good morning," she greeted me warmly, enveloping me in a sisterly embrace. "I thought I'd stop by and see how you're settling in." I ushered her inside, marveling at how far our relationship had come. Months ago, we had been adversaries, caught in the crosshairs of Alex's deceit. Now, we were allies, bound by a shared experience that had forged an unbreakable bond of trust and respect. "It's perfect," I assured her, gesturing around the cozy living room. "Simple, but perfect." Vivian nodded, her eyes sweeping over the space with a critical but approving gaze. "I'm glad. You deserve a fresh start, Eliza, a chance to rebuild your life on your own terms." We settled onto the plush sofa, and I couldn't help but notice the subtle changes in Vivian's demeanor. Gone was the sharp, calculating persona she had once worn like armor. In its place was a warmth and vulnerability that I had never seen before. "How are things at the company?" I asked, sipping my coffee. Vivian's smile faltered ever so slightly, a hint of weariness creeping into her expression. "It's been a challenge, to say the least. Rebuilding the brand, restoring trust with our partners and shareholders, it's been an uphill battle." "But you're doing it," I reassured her. "You're turning things around, slowly but surely." A spark of pride flickered in her eyes, and she nodded resolutely. "Yes, we are. It's not easy, but I'm determined to reclaim our family's legacy, to show the world that the Preston name still stands for something." As we lapsed into comfortable silence, I couldn't help but reflect on the incredible journey we had both undertaken. From the depths of despair and betrayal, we had risen like phoenixes from the ashes, emerging stronger and more resilient than ever before. The legal battles had been grueling, the emotional toll nearly overwhelming at times. But through it all, we had remained resolute, steadfast in our determination to see justice served and our lives restored. And now, as I looked around my humble abode, I felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over me. Gratitude for the strength that had carried me through the darkest of times, and for the unwavering support of the woman who had become more than just an ally. She was family, in the truest sense of the word. "Eliza," Vivian's voice broke the silence, her tone earnest. "I know words can never undo the trauma you endured, but I want you to know how deeply sorry I am for not seeing the truth sooner." I reached out, squeezing her hand reassuringly. "You have nothing to apologize for, Vivian. We were both caught in Alex's web of lies. The important thing is that we found our way out, together." A small smile tugged at the corner of her lips, and she nodded, her eyes shining with a mixture of gratitude and understanding. In that moment, I knew that the scars of the past would never fully fade. The memories of Alex's cruelty, the bitter taste of betrayal, would always linger in the shadows of my mind. But I had emerged from the darkness stronger and more resilient than ever before. As I bid farewell to Vivian and settled back into the comfort of my new home, I couldn't help but feel a profound sense of hope for the future. The tangled web that had once threatened to strangle me was severed, the monster at its center vanquished, and I was free to chart my own course. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of excitement rather than trepidation. I was no longer a victim, defined by the trauma of my past. I was a survivor, a warrior who had stared down the abyss and emerged victorious. And as I gazed out at the bustling city skyline, a world of possibilities stretched before me, waiting to be embraced with open arms.